In this IOB podcast, we're interviewing Booth Junkie, home studio expert. Plus, we're critiquing the Revelations and Reflections podcast. This is the IOB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and it's my goal to make your podcast the best. Thank you for listening to another IOB Podcast episode. My name is Mike. Today, a double banger, an interview, plus a podcast format critique at the end. First, the interview, Mike Delgaudio, VO Pro. He's been a professional voiceover artist for years, and he decided to bring his audio expertise to the public. Booth Junkie, the recording guru, has a huge following on YouTube. He lays out every aspect you can imagine when it comes to being a voiceover artist, and importantly for us as podcasters, how to set up the perfect studio in your home, with money or without money. And personally, his without money one is really excellent. I love it. No, it doesn't involve being in a closet. It's better than that and more comfortable. In this podcast, we will get the lowdown on voice and studio. As his website's tagline goes, record something amazing. Yeah, I just don't have a voice like he does. Let's find out how. Without any further ado, let's welcome Mike Delgaudio, a.k.a. Booth Junkie. Mike Delgaudio, Booth Junkie, voiceover artist. Mike's a voiceover artist with experience in every medium: TV, video, social media, advertising, film, you name it. And he's added home studio guru to the mix. He's been helping voice actors set up their own home studios and helping them with the Reaper software too. And I think he's going to be perfect for us podcasters, helping us create the best environments we can at home to make a high quality sounding podcast. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is great for me because I've been in voice work, for a long time, but not voice acting. But that just sounds cool. And voiceovers, well, it applies to commercials, advertising a lot, but it's also acting, right?
I mean, that's primarily what it is. It's more often than not, we are acting. We are portraying somebody else's words, not just to hear them spoken, but to influence somebody in some way, to entertain them, to make them feel an emotion, to make them buy a product, to make them enjoy, gain trust in something. It's primarily, it's acting, isn't it? When you think of it, it is acting first.
So how did you get into voiceovers? Why not regular acting? Why did you get into the voice area?
Sure. I never actually had a desire to be in front of a camera. I know I'm on YouTube and I do that now, but I've never actually had much of a strong desire to be in front of a camera. I like the chance to be able to mess it up and go again without having to reset a whole bunch of stuff. So voice acting actually works out perfectly because if I mess up, I just stop what I'm doing and I go back and I go again. I never really had a desire to be on camera. I've always, the part of this performance has been trying to influence as much as possible, do all of the acting with just my voice. 99% of the time, 99.5% of the time, you don't see me. And so I have to try and convince you of everything I'm doing with my body with just my voice, which is actually can be fairly challenging. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I might not succeed, but the goal is to try and convince you as best I can with just my voice. And sometimes it works.
When it comes to having a voice where you have to convey a certain character, which is actually true of a podcaster, because the podcaster wants to convey this expertise, this expert behind the mic, somebody that you want to call a friend, that you can rely on, that you can get advice from, things like that. Is there a voice, a timbre? Is there a style of speaking that's best? Can anybody do it? Because I just think of, James Earl Jones. This is CNN. That's the ultimate voice, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you were asking me 20 years ago, it probably was. You want to sound like James Earl Jones. You want to have this huge thundering voice that was the voice of authority. But really, if you listen to a lot of voice work that you hear today, if you just stop and like listen to the commercials you hear on Spotify in between, the pre-roll commercials on YouTube, the stuff you hear on radio and television, it sounds, very rarely do you have James Earl Jones. It's mostly regular people, regular guys, regular gals, and they're just using their voice. The day of the huge announcer voice, I think, is long behind us now. And yeah, does it help if you have a voice that's rich and sonorous or whatever, something that sounds really, nice to listen to? Yeah, but that's still just for a narrow sliver of work. There's so much work out there that everybody's voice sounds right. Every voice you hear sounds right for some gig. Every voice has this narrow sliver of work that it can do. Some voices may be more facile than others, and they can do a broader range of work, but every single voice can be used professionally, because really it's about the acting. I can't portray a little kid very well. I can't portray certain voices very well, whereas other people will have a voice that sounds vastly different than mine, and they'll be perfectly suited for those gigs. So there's plenty of work to go around. There's plenty of different ways that any voice can be used. Just listen to anything. I don't know if you get HBO, but the guy who does, I wish I knew his name. I don't know who does the voices for the HBO intro, but his voice is very far from like announcer voice, James Earl Jones voice. And, he's like, and now he's got a much more, not nasal voice, but much higher voice.
Almost nasal. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really his own thing, making it work. I think it's his career, just doing the promos for HBO. I think he's made a career out of it. And so there's voices. Everybody's voice can work in this profession.
It's a matter, I guess, of confidence in your
Yeah.
voice and
Yeah.
confidence in knowing what you're saying. And as a podcaster, actual genuine interest or love of the subject, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And that should always show through. So if you are a podcaster and you're trying to speak from an area of authority in what you're talking about, that should show through. If you're nervous behind the microphone will absolutely tell the whole world that you're nervous behind the microphone. It's about
Any advice on that?
Get in front of the microphone and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. It's all about practice. If you're nervous and like, oh, I don't like the way I sound. Oh, this is no good. I can't do this. Right. Then no one's ever going to believe you that no matter what you're talking about. But if you're like, yeah, this microphone, it's just the way that you hear me, but you and I are just talking. We're just talking here. And as soon as you get past that nervousness of like, oh, this microphone, tens of hundreds or thousands or millions of people are going to hear me. You got to put all that stuff aside and just let yourself show through. And when you let yourself and your expertise, when you let that show through, the microphone knows it, and everybody listening knows it, because they're putting in their mind's eye the way you look, the way you sound, the way you act. And if you look and if you sound confident and expert, then that should come through. We certainly hope it will come through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe focusing on a family member as you speak, but what about in your case? I mean, as an actor, do you get nervous sometimes? Let's say there's a big project that rolls through. Maybe you're not sure of the character or the voice. Do you get nervous?
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's always an apprehension that you're going to get it right. Like, I'm certainly not alone when I say I'm my own worst critic. I am certainly really hard on myself, and I hear things that I recorded a couple of weeks ago. I go, how did I turn that in? That's terrible. How could I have turned that in? But that's just like imposter syndrome, shining through, and you kind of have to get past that. I certainly want to do a good job. I try and do my prep work. I try and get comfortable with my script before I have to perform it, if I have that chance. But, you really, the job of the actor, I suppose, if I could say that, if I'm not the world's most accomplished actor, but our job as actors is to breathe life into that script and make that script sound like the way the author intended it to try and get that message across. So that's part of what we do as acting and reading our script and understanding and trying to convince and convey what that script says. Yeah. Do we get nervous? Sure, we might, but you got to get past it because the mic will hear it. The mic will totally hear it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just preparation, right? It's just preparation. Does any rock and roll guitarist get nervous before he's on or she's on stage? Yeah, they all get nervous.
Said he did. Prince said he got nervous before performances.
Right. And I mean, is there who's going to say Prince doesn't know how to play an instrument, right? He's expert at like practically every instrument. You get nervous because you want to perform correctly, but what you do beforehand, just like anybody else, whether it's, sports, music, anything like that, we practice, we become good at our craft, I suppose. We get good at our tools so that the only thing we have to worry about is the performance and not like the technical. You want to try and get that technical aspect into you. And the same thing with podcasting. It's not that much different for podcasting. If you want to have a natural conversation, you got to be comfortable with the mic. You got to be comfortable with the levels. You got to be comfortable with your software, with your mixer, with the technology that you're using to communicate with other people. And that part, you got to do all that practicing so that when it comes time, you're just having a conversation. We've never met. We may be nervous talking to each other, but we have to get past that and just let ourselves show through. Because if we're nervous talking to each other, everyone's gonna recognize that because the mic will tell everybody.
Absolutely. So, is working in voiceovers much different from podcasting? I'm guessing actually it kind of is. I mean, obviously there's the mic, but I'm sitting down. I'm pretty comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, I think podcasting's a big world. So there's some places where voice acting and podcasting is exactly the same. In audio dramas, right? I'm on a podcast every week where it's an audio drama. I get the script maybe a couple of days before I'm to perform it, and I perform my side of it without ever hearing anybody else. I have to imagine what everybody else is doing. Pretty common in audio drama, pretty common in animation if you're doing animation work, common in video games. There's no actual conversation. You're anticipating what that is. So in that case, voice acting, podcasting, exactly the same. Podcasting and interviews, that's a lot more like maybe improv, for lack of a better word. You and I aren't working from a script. We might know about some questions that we want to talk about, but otherwise we're vamping, right? We're improvising as we go, and this conversation will go where it goes. So there are some aspects of it that are very similar, and depending on what part of podcasting you're talking about, it could be exactly the same.
Right. We don't have to do voices though. I guess we could.
You could. I mean, I think there are some podcasts where there's, that's part of the gig, right? Where you're imitating something. And I think there are some podcasters where their whole podcast personality is entirely different than the person who they are behind the microphone. Not a podcaster, but you think of people like, show my age here, Gilbert Gottfried. Doesn't really talk like that. If you remember from way back in the older days, yeah. That's his voice, but it was definitely like an amped up version of it. Do you remember?
Norm Macdonald just passed away. I wonder if he was like that in real life because his voice was so unique.
Very distinctive. I think probably, I don't know, never heard him out of character, but I imagine that his cadence when he's just goofing around with the guys is maybe a little different. It may be amped up. I don't know. I have no idea.
Right.
But, go back to, do you remember way back, for show our age here, do you remember Bobcat Goldthwait? Just a regular. Do you remember Bobcat? Old comedian, a comedian from the 80s. And he had a really, really affected voice, really incredibly affected voice. But when you heard him out of character, just regular guy, Pee Wee Herman. Pee Wee Herman was a complete character and didn't really sound like that in real life.
That's good.
So, and I'm sure that there are plenty of podcasters. Those are just examples that maybe a lot of people know, but there are plenty of podcasters out there, I imagine, who are doing that same thing. Their podcast is a character as a whole. Sounds different than their regular voice.
I never thought about that. Maybe because is the radio voice different? I think everything's the same, but that's really interesting. That might be actually if somebody is like they don't like their voice or they're nervous about themselves being on a microphone or being recorded, that might be a good method to kind of get over that hump too.
It certainly could be. I know when I was getting practice with voice acting, one of my coaches would say, if I was really sort of going up and not getting across what the script was calling for, and I just couldn't get there, he'd be like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's go crazy. Pretend you're a cowboy from the Wild West. How would the cowboy do it? And all of a sudden, if you put yourself into a character and all of a sudden your delivery becomes much different, it becomes much more, or, common things. You'll say, well, okay, how would, Vinny from Brooklyn do it? All of a sudden you're putting on a Brooklyn accent and your delivery will come very different. And often it can get you over that, oh, I'm stuck in the script and I can't get it the way I want to get it. And my voice just won't do it the way I want. But as soon as you free yourself and you put yourself into a cartoon character or a parody character, something like that, all of a sudden it can be very freeing. And so I think that happens with a lot of people. I'm reminded of, this is going back to like the 70s, but there was a singer, Mel Tillis. Do you know that name? Yeah. He had a very bad speech impediment. He stuttered really badly until he sang. As soon as he got on stage, and it was like his regular life, he became famous because he was stutterer. But as soon as he got up on stage and started singing, out it came. And never stuttered. Yeah. So, if maybe it's just, you just got to flip that switch in your head and turn off, get out of your own head and into somebody else's, I think sometimes can really, can make you, change your delivery and perhaps be more convincing, or allow you to go outside yourself to portray in a way that's different. So whether that's being your personality for your podcast, or whether that's you're trying to portray a character for somebody's advertisement or their drama or whatever it is, you can, there are techniques that help you step outside your own head to free yourself to be those characters.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, we've been chit-chatting a lot here, but it's so interesting. But we need to get into the studio. I want to talk about studios.
Let's talk some tech.
So there are so many aspects to a studio, and it depends on where you live and so let's do this.
Yeah.
What's the worst room? The bathroom, I'm guessing, to record in, and what's the best room to record in?
Yeah. I think
typical house.
Yeah. If we're talking at home, your kitchen or your bathroom's probably going to be your worst room. Short of like a.
And why is that? I mean, obviously the bathroom, it's echo, but when you sing in the bathroom, you sound good. So people might think that might be a good place.
Right. Well, if you're singing for your podcast, maybe. So the thing you want to look about when you're thinking about, if you're making a podcast, if you want to become a voice actor, if you want to practice at home, even if you want to make your Zoom calls better, the natural sound of our voice, you go into any room and you clap your hands, you give one loud clap, you'll hear an echo, that flutter echo of that sound bouncing off the walls and hitting your ears again. And it might bounce off the wall to your left, then come across to the wall on your right, and then into your ears. You'll hear this like flutter echo. When we talk, our ears typically drown that out, right? Our head, we've learned how to, we use that for spatial recognition, but the microphone doesn't do that. The microphone just lets it all in and doesn't filter it out. So when you're listening on headphones or you're listening to something, you can get that sense of a room. When you're talking in the kitchen, it sounds different than when you're talking in your walk-in closet, for example, right? The closet has got lots of soft, cozy things, and that absorbs the sound. Whereas your kitchen, your bathroom is very reflective. It's like being in a room full of mirrors. All of that sound comes right back into the microphone. So in any situation where you want to try and improve your acoustics, before you go spend money on a microphone, the typical advice is to spend money on making your room, quote unquote, sounding better by adding, usually it's soft stuff around you so that the sound doesn't bounce off the wall and come back into the microphone. It's a really interesting phenomenon. You'll hear it whenever, like if you watched, certainly during the pandemic, everybody who was Zoom, doing a remote interview over Zoom, you'd hear the room and it would be very confusing to listen to. The audio fidelity would be very bad because you could hear that echo. Off every surface. And that's what we try. Certainly as voice actors, we need all of that echo to completely disappear. For podcasting, it's perhaps a bit more forgiving. It's okay if it sounds like you're in your podcasting room, but you want to try and get rid of all of that echo so that there isn't any. So when you clap your hands, it's just dead. You just hear the clap and no echo. And that's what makes a good room versus a bad room. Now, you said, we like to sing in the shower because we sound good. It's that buildup of echo that often makes singing voices sound good. That reverb, the natural reverb that singers often get. I know a lot of old radio DJs would put reverb on their voice, makes it sound bigger, make it sound smoother. Reverb can help, but when you're just listening to long form speaking, it's exhausting. It doesn't sound right. And for voice actors, we need it especially, all that to go away, because many times our voice is being put into a room or a set or something like that. When I'm on like audio drama podcasts, they need to make my voice sound like it's in the bathroom or in the kitchen or in the garage or outside. So they need to be able to manipulate my voice. And the only way they can manipulate my voice is if there's no imperfection, quote unquote, to begin with. And so
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I've got an office here, and it's actually surrounded by glass. I've got doors here, glass doors, windows.
Yeah.
So I have these blackout curtains over the windows. That's probably effective. I'm guessing
it's doing
that's
something.
going to help a lot.
Yeah. It's absolutely doing something.
And my partner, TJ, has a music studio, also an office. And TJ has these foam pads that she stuck on the wall.
Yep.
And I assume that's probably even better.
Yep. Yeah. That actually, all that stuff helps. All the soft stuff between you and a reflective surface will reduce it. The higher the frequency of our voice, so the treble part of our voice, the thinner the material. Thin material can absorb that really well. The deep bass in our voice, that will go right through it. So some places need thicker pads. Sometimes you'll see people like using moving pads. I use in my studio down here, I've got 4 inches of very dense insulation all over my walls, all over my ceiling, to really, really reduce it so that there's no sense of echo. So that's what I have to do in mine so that there is no echo. But yours, the curtains are probably taking, 40 or 50% of that echo away, which may be absolutely fine. And the other aspect of it is many of our microphones, they're really only sensitive from one side. As you turn and talk into the wrong side of a microphone, the microphone can barely hear you. So if you can strategically place your microphone so that the most reflective surface is on the back of the microphone won't hear those echoes so well. So there's a lot of tricks you can do besides just the soft stuff.
Okay. And speaking of microphones, we're going to get there in a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question about my microphone. The way I have it set up and the way you have yours set up is different. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like perhaps for a lot of people, a bedroom actually might not be a bad place to record, because you got the bed in there that could absorb stuff. You probably have some curtains over the windows.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're just starting out, you might want to start there just to get rid of that echo.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, bedrooms actually can be really good. And here's a secret: messy bedrooms are even better because there's stuff all over the place. Tin foil that's all crinkly does not reflect light as good as a mirror, because there's lots of angles and it's deflecting the light in all different places. Your messy bedroom, bookshelves are great. Having dressers open a couple of the drawers are great. Leave the closet door open, because that sound's going to go in there and get stuck there. And there's going to be lots of places that sound is being absorbed. So a bedroom, with the comforter, with the pillow, put your winter clothes on it. You can, all that soft stuff can absorb any echo and make the room sound better.
I should name this podcast "Messy Bedroom." Yeah, that's really good. I like it.
The messy bedroom. Yep.
So let's get to the fun stuff, but
man.
it can be expensive.
Hardware,
the mics, the interface, computers, and I know, it depends. There's a range. How much do you have? How much do you want to spend? So just throw out a number if you could. Really, like perhaps your studio, like throw all the money at it, and then somebody who's like completely new, the cheap end. So what kind of money are we thinking if you want to go on the cheap end, or if you're ready to just dive in 100%?
The cheap end, I don't know, $300-400 all in. And that would be, and I mean except for the computer, that would be all in. So microphone, interface, and some foam to put around you to make the room sound good. You could probably do it for maybe $350 all in, and that would be $99 microphone. And there's probably like an $80 microphone that would be good, but there's a sweet spot of $99 that you can get microphones all day long that are going to sound good. You get an interface that's about $125, going to sound great. No one's going to know the difference. It's going to sound fantastic. So there's what, 220 of it. Spend the other $100 and some odd dollars to buy a 5-pack of moving blankets to drape over the walls and the furniture, and bam, Bob's your uncle. You got a podcast studio that 90% of the people are not going to know the difference between that and the $10,000 worth of stuff I'm talking to you through right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so $300 is nice, but it can get serious.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm and mine's
and this is at home. You're at home, right?
Yeah. This is like, by comparison, my studio is relatively modest when compared to what you're talking. When we really get into it, what we're talking about. But mine, I spent probably $3,000 or $4,000 on my booth. I'm not in my booth, but in my booth that's behind me, that's $3,000 or $4,000. That just takes the place of the $200 worth of moving blankets. And the reason I spend that is for consistency. My booth will sound the same today as 6 months from now, as 6 years from now. I will always guarantee that my sound is good and consistent and broadcast quality, right? So I want to spend that for consistency. Just like, there's a reason, when you watch late night television, that those cameras are huge cameras and not just DSLRs. DSLRs still make a really nice 4K picture, but it's nothing like those big professionals because it's repeatable. It can be optimized. It's more durable. It's going to last longer. There's a bunch of other stuff that can do that. The professional tools can do. But
that's exciting.
The prosumer stuff, it's going to cover you for 90. You're going to get 90% of what you need out of it. And then it just starts to get to diminishing returns. But, my microphone costs more. My preamplifiers cost more. My interface costs more, just because I want it to be, there's certain requirements that I need to make, certain standards I need to meet. The equipment needs to last a long time, that sort of stuff.
Oh, that's great. That's interesting. So $99 for a mic. That's great.
Yeah.
An interface. Now this is, and I have an interview coming up with Focusrite. This is what you're talking about.
Yeah. So
that type of tool.
That's exactly. So there's, right now we're in sort of this really good golden age of audio equipment. You can buy a microphone that plugs directly into your computer over USB. It's got a headphone jack, and really that could be all you need. A good one's going to cost you a couple of $100. And that has the interface is the part that goes between the analog part, the microphone, and the digital part, your computer. The interface is what converts the analog signal, the actual motion of the air, turns it into the ones and zeros that your computer can understand. Does some other stuff, but that's the long and short of it. And there are certainly reasonably good ones out there that I know there are professionals out there that are using $150 interfaces that work great. They sound good. They don't degrade the quality of the sound. Whatever the mic sends to the interface is going to send to the computer, and it's going to sound great. But that's what that piece of equipment's responsibility is. First and foremost is to turn the analog movement of the air into the ones and zeros that the computer can understand. And also to have a headphone amplifier to give you your signal back so that you can hear it. And also to adjust how loud that microphone sound will be as it goes into the computer. It's called a preamplifier. You can make it sound quiet. You can make it sound loud. So when the computer receives it, it's got whatever the loudness of the signal you need to send to the computer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yes, it does. Okay, so microphone, interface, obviously your PC.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, pretty much.
Yeah.
Regarding equipment.
Pretty much, yeah. Once it gets to the computer, there's a piece of software that you could use, but there's free software. The most common one right now is called Audacity. And that will
That's the DAW, right?
that Audacity is like an audio editor. It's not like a full workstation, but most voice actors, podcasters, they're going to use a workstation because it makes the workflow easier. But if you're just trying to record to hear your own voice, do some basic editing, Audacity will work great. When you're ready to move up to a tool that can save you time, that can make your job repeatable and streamlined, that's when you would move up to something other than the free version.
And that, once again, that would be a DAW. That's
DAW.
What's the DAW?
Yeah, it stands for Digital Audio Workstation. And that's
and you
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, you recommend Reaper. Can you explain what this workstation does and why are you liking Reaper?
Yeah.
Because I heard that musicians like Reaper.
Yeah. So the Digital Audio Workstation at its whole is to make whatever you're recording manipulatable in the computer. So whether you're playing your keyboard you're recording your guitar, you're singing, you're voice acting, whatever it is, the workstation is then where you process the audio to turn out the final product. Just like photographers use Photoshop. They take it from the camera, they move it to Photoshop, they manipulate it in Photoshop, and then they make their final JPEGs out of it. If you're making videos, you take things with your camera, you feed it through DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut to manipulate it, to edit it, to make it sound and look right before you make the final MP4 or video file that you're uploading to YouTube, for example. In audio, we have the Digital Audio Workstation that receives the data it gets from the interface, the ones and zeros from the interface, allows us to manipulate it in ways, in different ways, to edit out our mistakes, to make it louder, to make it quieter, to make it sound like we're in different rooms, to make it sound like I'm on the telephone or in the bathroom or whatever it is, right? And then we can snip out our mistakes, we can rearrange things, and then we make the final MP3 that might go out as your podcast. And that's what the DAW is for. There's a whole bunch of them. There are ones that are really optimized for making electronic music, for example. If you've ever heard of Ableton is one that's DAW really, really well designed for electronic music. There's the most common, the most famous one is probably Pro Tools, that you've always, heard of. Certainly, probably every record that's been put out in the last 20 years, most likely it was made on Pro Tools, really pro level gear. Really, it can be really quite expensive, pretty steep learning curve. The Adobe suite has Adobe Audition. That is one. And the one I happen to use, the one I like, is called Reaper. And I like it for a number of reasons. It's got a relatively gentle learning curve by comparison to something like Pro Tools, probably on par with Adobe Audition, but it's also, the price is very, very forgiving. The people who make it are cognizant that there's a difference between Audacity at free and Adobe Audition that's $20 a month, something like that.
Right.
I think is like the entry level for Adobe Audition. That's a pretty big delta, that $200 a year just to edit audio. And so Reaper really falls much closer to the Audacity side. It's not free, but it's $60 every 5 or so years. So it's very, very reasonably priced. The trial, unlike something like Pro Tools, where the sort of the low powered or the trial versions have really severe limitations that you come up against very quickly. The number of tracks you can have, the number of plugins you can use, and so forth. Reaper's trial is the exact same as its quote unquote most expensive version. The only thing that's different is if you make more money with Reaper, they ask for a little bit more money. So if you're just getting started, the trial version you can use for like a month, a year, anything you want. As soon as you make your first couple of bucks with it, $60. $60 is where it comes in for most people. And then once you establish it as your career and you're making good money with Reaper, they ask for $225, I think. And it's literally once every 5 years. Every time they move through the two major versions after you've purchased it. So I purchased it at 5. I think I have to purchase it again at version 7. They're in 6 something right now. And it's like 200 incremental versions, 5.01, 5.02, 5.03, all the way up to 6.99 or whatever it is. So whenever you buy like 2 major versions, it's really super forgiving, super powerful. I've yet to run into anything that I can't do with it. For the people who are way smarter than me, there's like, if you're good with Python, if you're a programmer, you can do Python programming to manipulate your audio in all sorts of different ways. Huge community around it. They have a guy named Kenny Joya who runs a channel called Reaper Mania, and that's essentially like their training manual is this guy's YouTube channel. He works for them, and he just makes video after video about everything that this piece of software can do, and it's huge what it can do. But the learning curve is not so steep that you can't get started with it. Just, you want to goof around and record a couple of jokes for your friends, or make a podcast that only you and a couple of your buddies are going to hear. It can work there. It can work all the way up to producing albums if you wanted to. Really super, super capable.
That's really great. So let's say I have a podcast, and then suddenly, for some reason, in the middle of my podcast, I want to have like a little conversation where I'm outside talking to my dog.
Sure.
So suddenly I can do everything as I'm recording it right now, and then I can go into something like Reaper, and I'm assuming it's multi-track. I can probably kind of change a filter on my voice. I could add some birds and the dog sound. That's
absolutely,
that's what I can do with Reaper.
Yeah. So think of anything that's got any sort of sound design to it. If you watch a movie without the picture, turn the picture off and just listen to a movie in your head. All of the sounds, all of the dialogue, all of the effects, anything like that all can be done in Reaper from like a podcasting perspective. Just as you listen to the latest Taylor Swift record, she probably uses Pro Tools, but you could do everything that she does in Pro Tools, you can do in Reaper. You could likely also do an Audition, but you can use the workstation to do that. But yeah, and any sort of sound design, whether it's creation, whether it's manipulation of an existing recording, anything like that, can all be done in Reaper for sure.
It sounds like the community is so good. I know your YouTube channel, you actually do a lot of videos on Reaper too. So let's say I wanted to, how do I make my voice echoey?
Sure.
That's easy to YouTube, Google it, and find that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. How do I add, echo to my voice or reverb to my voice? How do I equalize my voice? How do I edit my recordings? Yeah, any of those things. How do I add compression? If the variation between it's too loud at one point and it's too quiet at the other point, how can I fix that? What are the different things that I can do? And the nice thing about the workstations that's different from like an audio editor. An audio editor, you might have to do those manipulations one at a time throughout. The workstations, you can add plugins to them. So there's this huge world of plugins that work on all the audio workstations that you just add it in and it will do things for you. Things like adding echo, or things like I had a ham sandwich for lunch and now my mouth is clicky. There's a plugin that will go through and just listen for the clickiness of your mouth and take those out. There's ones that if you're breathing too hard, in between your sentences, there's a de-breather. If your S sound is too whistly, there's a de-esser that will take the S away. There's a million things. If you've got a PC fan in the background that's making noise, there's a denoiser that will take those things away. So the workstations really are optimized for a professional to make their work easier, repeatable, and deliverable.
Fantastic. I think anybody listening to this podcast who's been using something like Audacity, I think at this point, it's probably been sold on a DAW. And Reaper, the price is right.
The price is absolutely right. And the people who make it, they've got a nice long history. If you're familiar back in the olden days of the internet, if you ever used Winamp, it's the same guy. So Winamp was, until iTunes came along, Winamp was the way to listen to your music digitally. It was essentially
Right.
the way. And they had visualizations and you could add effects to it. It could manage your library. The guys, after they sold that to AOL, they decided to make something to help music creators create their create their music. And so they created Reaper, and they're all really, really expert at audio. And I've fallen in love with it. I've never found anything that it couldn't do to make my job easier. And as a voice
Are you
actor,
saying it's better than Sony Vegas for editing audio?
better's in the eye of the beholder, right? I'm not going to say better. It's the one I know best, and I've yet to say, boy, I think I need to look elsewhere because Reaper can't do it. So somebody may
Yeah.
say the very
And
same thing about
that's saying something. That's
Yeah.
saying something because you're not the run of the mill podcaster. This is your life. This is
it's
your
everything.
job.
And 90% of the videos on my YouTube channel I've edited in Reaper. It's a very, very basic video editor, but it can do. I've yet to have it do something, certainly in the audio world, that I couldn't make it do, or make it work in such a way that my job became easier in the sense of, let's imagine I'm recording an audiobook and I need 50 chapters, all as individual MP3s that all are of a certain volume, that have a certain level of silence in between my words, that are stripped to the right distance at the end, after I end my speaking and before I start my speaking, and they're all named in a certain way and they meet the right MP3 format. Like, you can make it so that in Reaper, that all becomes, I click one button called render and it does everything for me. Gets the volumes right, trims it right, names it right, puts it in the right directory, meets all of it. Takes a little configuration, but that's why we learn and understand our tool. But it gets to the point where if I've got to deliver 1,000 e-learning slides that all have to be extremely consistent, the workstation can do that for me. And I'm not going through 1,000 files and renaming them one by one by one by one over and over again.
Like what I'm doing right now.
Well,
yeah, I'm working on this. I'm working on this guy's accounting system,
Yeah.
and I'm just kind of narrating it. And I'm not a voice actor, but he asked me to do it, so I did it for him. And now I'm realizing, and there's probably 50 MP3s. Now I'm realizing, I'm certain I sound different on different days.
Yeah, you certainly can.
That can be a problem.
Yeah. Well, voice actor would just say,
Great.
all you got to do is warm up. You got to warm up beforehand so that you don't sound too different.
So tell us about your website. I mentioned YouTube. It's youtube.com.
Yep. If you just Google Booth Junkie, you'll find me. There's two Booth Junkies on Earth. One is a photo booth software in the UK, and there's me. And so if you search Booth Junkie for anything audio related, you're going to come to me. I'm Booth Junkie on Twitter, on the very rare instance that I put anything on Instagram. Primarily, you'll find me on YouTube. That's my primary platform. And boothjunkie.com. Essentially, when you go there, the first thing it says is go watch my YouTube channels. But if, people will say, hey, could you help me set up Reaper? Could you help give me one-on-one coaching? Yeah, you can find me there, and I'm happy to coach and help people get started. If there's something specific that my videos don't deliver, then there's always, I'm always happy to do one-on-one. But my channels, it's gear recommendations. It's all this kind of stuff. It's how can we become more proficient at our craft, whether it's podcasting, streaming, voice acting, pretty much in front of the microphoning, whatever we're doing in front of the microphone. How can we do it better, faster, more consistently? That's what my channel tries to help impart.
And I saw one page that you had, kit.co.
Yeah.
Mike Delgaudio, and that was set up cool. And I think I saw a $300 kit there.
There
right?
certainly could be. Yeah, there's certainly. Yeah. So what kit.co is, it's a website that allows creators, quote unquote creators, to assemble kits of things. So like I might have a kit there, I think that's like the different kind of insulation you might use in your booth, with like the fiberglass insulation that we talked about, or the moving pads that we talked about. Or if you're setting up for the first time, what are the kinds of equipment that you might buy? What's that $300 kit? That's a little microphone, a little the interface and stuff like that. So you'll have those different things, the little things that you'll need. What kind of interface will you need? If you got $1,000 to spend on gear, if you get $500 to spend on gear, just that sort of stuff.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah. So check out, and I'll put all these links in the show notes, and I'll put them in our newsletter in the future so that people can come and check this stuff out. That's for sure. Mike, it's been outstanding, and it's been a great learning experience for me. And now I realize that I'm going to have an unhappy client probably. So thanks a lot. Just added some more work for me. And now I realize I should not be using Sony Vegas. I should probably switch over to Reaper.
Nah.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate it.
Well, if there's anything I can do to help you spend more money.
It's been fabulous. We really appreciate it,
It's
Mike.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks so much.
Hope you like that interview. Personally, I have a very decent podcast setup. Not super expensive. My podcast setup is $600, $700, maybe $800. That's not too expensive, actually. But my goodness, you can hear how much better Mike Delgaudio sounds than me. I mean, just the voice color, the depth, it just sounds so much better. I'm not talking the tone. I mean, obviously our tones are going to be different, but just such a fuller voice, and it sounds wonderful. Yeah. So I understand his voice is much better, but this is true. With another upgrade in equipment, I could get closer to his level too. We all can. We seriously can. Step by step, though. It's expensive, very expensive process, step by step. But I can tell you, when I do upgrade, there's no question I'll be going to Mike. I'll be going to Booth Junkie for advice. Thank you so much for the interview, Mike. Go check out his website. Again, that's boothjunkie.com. And I have all the links to all of his sites that we talked about in the show notes. We're not done, everybody. Thank you for listening. It's time for us to move on to a podcast critique. Podcast critique time, revelations and reflections. That's the name of the podcast. The host, Kim Harriel, and co-host, Robin Horston Spencer. And it's a great podcast. Once again, we're not going to talk about content, but let me talk about 3 things, Kim. The intro, the body, and the closing. All right? So the intro, I absolutely loved it. The VO, the voiceover, your words in the intro were great. And you have a very mellifluous voice. It's a very nice voice. The music, as you know, Kim, we need to improve that. And I understand what you're doing, Kim. You've created an intro and you're using it for every podcast. And that's great. I have part of my podcast is set up like that too. The length of the intro is great, but we can make it smoother, okay? And by the way, in your intro, your CTA, your call to action is spectacular. Leave a rating and stuff like that. Guys, do that. I don't do it enough, but it's very important to make sure everybody knows your name, to make sure everybody knows where they can find you, website, email, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Not everything. Just give them 1 or 2. And make sure people know that they should give you a rating, that they should leave a comment, that they should interact with you somehow. So this is very important. And Kim, you did a great job. So I'm very curious as to what software you were using. And the reason I'm saying this is because the intro to the podcast, the audio quality is good, but the body of the podcast, the audio quality is very different. And I'm not going to say bad, but I'm going to say very different. Okay, so obviously one was done, I'm guessing, I don't know, with a different microphone, in a different place. So I'm very curious about how you're doing it so differently. And the audio is different, and it can be fixed, or rather, it could be improved. It could be, they could sound more similar depending on the software you're using. So, for example, if you're using Adobe Audition, okay, what you would need to do is you would need to basically match the audio levels. And there are 3 steps to clean up the audio. Number 1 is something called noise reduction. That's an effect. And then number 2, there's something called compression. And then number 3, there's something called normalize. And for example, if one audio is really loud and the other audio is really soft, there's something called matching too, where you can actually make those audio levels come out the same, essentially the same. So it takes some editing, but that's something that would really enhance your podcast. And the reason I'm telling you this, the reason I'm spending some time explaining this, Kim, is because let's say I'm taking a walk and I'm listening to you as I walk. I got earbuds or earphones or headphones or something, right? So when your podcast starts, I have to adjust the volume. And that volume level in your intro is great and everything is really nice. But then when you switch over to the interview, the volume level is very, very different. So what do? I have to increase the volume level into my ears. And then at the end, the volume level, boom, shoots back up. And now I got people screaming in my ears. It's like shocking. Do you understand? So that's why we call this levels, the volume levels. The volume, keep the levels as similar as possible. It's very important for podcasts, especially for podcasts, because people literally tend to stick the podcast in their ears. So when there's a huge audio difference from one part to another part, or from one person to another person, boy, that's very frustrating, and it could hurt the ears. People aren't going to want to listen. Okay, so that's something that's important. Now, when you're doing your interviews with Robin and stuff like that, everybody's audio level is pretty equal. Okay, so the interview, the body section alone is okay. Once again, we can clean up the noise. We can make it sound better with noise reduction, compression, and normalizing. Those are editing functions. But in general, the audio level is pretty good. It's the intro and the outro. There's a huge difference, and that needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed, okay? What else can I say? Okay, this is just a suggestion. So you have your intro, and I believe it's Kim Harrell. Kim is doing the intro. And then when the body starts, when the main part of the podcast kicks in, it seems like Robin is doing most of the talking. And once again, the audio quality is different. And I understand, usually when you do a live interview type thing, you're in a different environment. Anyway, going back to the intro, let's say, Kim, you do your intro. It's 15, 20 seconds long, not very long. And then you've got a little tiny blurb of music, and then Robin starts talking. My recommendation is, Kim, wherever you're doing the intro recording, in that same place, in that same audio environment, record another 10, 20, 30-second intro. And basically say something like, in this podcast, Robin starts us off, and she's going to talk to so-and-so who is so-and-so, and so-and-so who is so-and-so. So let's go to our live interview. Okay? If you just say that, just introduce the names, who's going to be speaking first, and it seems to be Robin mostly, and then who Robin is going to be talking to, just their names. Don't give any background, just their name and, title, a district attorney, candidate or whatever it was. That's enough. And then we could have like a music outro. You could fade the music down, and then you can just insert the actual interview. That's just my suggestion. It gives people, because we hear your voice in the very beginning, and then if you set up the live interview with the names of the people who are going to be speaking right away. As a listener, it makes it so much easy when we hear that transition because we've got decent audio quality and then that interview, different audio quality. But now we know it's a live interview. So now our ears and our mind is going to be expecting something different. And we're expecting to hear your voice, but Robin starts speaking. So you've already told us that. And once again, it's much easier on our ears. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I hope I explained that well. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So, and then finally in the closing. Yeah, this, you know, Kim, there's a music problem. You've got a great music choice, but the song A Summer Night's Dream is copyrighted. So you will definitely want to change that. You got to be careful. And also, if I can say one thing, add your CTA at the closing too. In the closing too, as always in your in your closings, it's nice to reiterate your appreciation for your guests. So so you could just say one, and once that you could start the closing like this. And that finishes this episode of Revelations and Reflections. Thank you so much to our guests, so-and-so and so-and-so. Don't forget to comment on iTunes, blah, blah, blah. Do your regular CTA. Send me an email, reach out on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, if you know what's going on, you can say, and in our next podcast, we look forward to, or you could even say, and in future podcasts, we look forward to talking to da-da-da-da-da. That's it. Thank you so much. And bye-bye, something like that. So that's just my suggestion for your closing. So a couple of big things that I think are important, Kim, for your podcast. And the number one thing is getting those audio levels to sound basically the same. You don't want your intro and closing to be one level and then the body of your podcast to be another. That's something that you really should try and fix as soon as possible. And I'm more than happy to kind of try and help you as much as I can. I just need to know, what microphone you're using. Is it a different microphone when you do the interview? I need to know, are you recording your intro in one place and the body of the podcast in another place? I'd like to know which software you're using. That can really change things. And especially the editing software. I want to know that. For example, I like to use Adobe Audition. So I want to know what you're using. And then I can kind of point you in the direction to get things fixed. So that's pretty much it. TJ's offer stands, Kim. So if you would like to work with TJ, she can make you an intro, and I can be along the way to help guide that process too. Thank you so much, Kim. I hope you liked our podcast critique. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Intro Outro Bed podcast. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Get our IOB newsletter at introoutrobed.com. Just go there, put your name, put your email, check, and we will send you that. TJ, our music composer, is very active on Twitter, twitter.com/introoutrobed, and also on Instagram. Again, introoutrobed. No dot. Just Instagram, introoutrobed. See, I am not active on Instagram, so I don't really know how to use it. I know I should be. You can send me an email, mike@introoutrobed.com. And if you're listening to this, wherever you're listening to this, iTunes or wherever, Spreaker, Stitchers, Spreaker. I obviously don't. I listen on iTunes. Please give us a rating and leave a comment. We would love to get out there more and more and more. You can feel free to share our content, tell people about us. And once again, if you would like a free intro, you can get one submit your podcast to us, not your idea, your actual podcast to us for a format critique. And if we choose you, if we give you a critique in our podcast, then TJ will offer you a free custom-made intro just for you and your show. So that's pretty cool stuff. Next time, we have another interview. So hang tight, be strong, make an excellent podcast, and have a great day.